People who have survived a murder attempt, by dumb luck. What's your story?
Throwaway because it got some media. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was representing this guy that had embezzled almost $500,000 from his business partner. He was looking down the barrel at several years in prison, a bunch of his assets had been seized by the government, was being sued by multiple creditors for north of $2 million, and was in the midst of an ugly divorce and wasn't allowed to see his kids. I was one of 3 lawyers he had: criminal, civil and divorce. He was drinking a lot and using coke. I used to get this incoherent phone calls in the middle of the night that ranged from threats to crying. He came to my office one day and asked for me, but I was in court. My secretary said he was perfectly civil. He then went to his divorce lawyer's office and shot him to death. Got stopped by the police a short distance away and was wounded in a shootout. He would later tell the cops that he had come to my office to shoot me that day and also planned to shoot his civil attorney. I was abducted at a gas station during undergrad. The locks on my car were broken, and as soon as I got back in, a strange man came in and forced me to drive him to an ATM. I am paralyzed with fear, so any sense or reason I had went out the window. He claimed he worked at Wendy's and for my generosity he would give me all the Wendy's I ever wanted. On the way to the ATM he showed me pictures of his daughters, on his clearly stolen cell phone. Then a Whitney Houston song came on the radio and he starts bawling his eyes out and screaming, "Why do all the good people have to die? Only bad things should happen to bad people." I go to the ATM, take out cash, give it to him thinking it's over. He then makes me get back in the car and drive him somewhere else. We pass by some train tracks and I'm thinking, this is it. This is where I will be murdered. He asks me what I'm studying in school, and I tell him biochemistry. I believe in jet propulsion and all that shit. We are not alone, aliens are among us. He then makes me pull over at a gas station and he tells me, "Drive away, sweetheart." I call the cops, had to do a lineup. Apparently this dude had done this to a ton of other women, and some were less unscathed than I was. Mine's not extreme by any chance, but a couple of years ago my brother and I went to walk the dog at like 11 p.m. We left through the side gate, live on a corner, and right as we exit I see this weird looking dude at the corner of the footpath walking weirdly towards us. Got bad vibes and told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This dude is walking kind of side on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate the dude says something like, "Oi mate, can I come in? I need a blanket, I'm freezing." I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then get a call from the people who live 2 doors up. The same dude knocked on their door and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the dude holding a fucking hatchet. Anyway, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. I was doing volunteer work in Central America, working in a really bad area of the capital city. It was a slum built on top of the city's garbage dump. The whole place reeked of trash, and there were large metal cylinders coming up out of the ground throughout the area to vent the gas from decomposing garbage underground. As a fellow volunteer and I walked down a dirt path, 2 men approached us. I'd never seen them before. They were acting strangely, but I just thought they were drunk or high. A lot of people in the area drank rubbing alcohol to get drunk, since it was cheaper than beer or liquor. Over time, drinking the rubbing alcohol would really mess with their brains. As the men got closer, they began acting really friendly, too friendly. One of them came close to me, trying to put his arm around my shoulders. At first, it seemed like the behavior of a guy who gets happy and friendly when he's drunk. However, an alarm went off in my head, and I gently but firmly pushed him away. I tried to make it seem lighthearted and playful, like, "Hey, man. How's it going?" Affectionate shove. I didn't want to make a scene, since I was a gringo. I didn't want to seem like an ugly American. This went on over and over down the whole path. He'd get close, I'd shove him off, he'd come close again. Finally, my friend and I came to a fork in the path, and we went one way while they went another. After we got to the house of some people we knew, we told them about the 2 guys. I was so focused on protecting myself, I didn't even notice much of what was happening with the other guy. They said, "Oh, everyone around here knows him. That's his routine. He comes up to people, pretends to be friendly, puts his arm around them, then pulls out his knife and stabs them in the stomach." I was that close to getting stabbed to death. I was 15 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 p.m. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and started dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brick and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze. because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk, called 911. Had 12 stitches, double layer, and a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them. I was riding in a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I had been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second-class seating, I did not spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually the train stopped and a man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment and I guess thought I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it were not for the fact that this particular station was the border between 2 countries, I would be dead. Instead, border patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half a dozen uniformed men jumped him and saved me. I was in the hospital for a little while but recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold the guy down while I hit him. I thought he was joking. So I said, "No, go ahead, you do it." I was also joking. But it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that at least. But they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people there depended upon tourism. Chilling with the brothers drinking at a park. As we drive off to leave, a car coming our way almost hits us. Driver obviously reacts like WTF, and I guess the other car noticed. They turned around and caught up to us at a stop sign. Other driver asked if we had a problem. We told them stop driving like assholes. Then their back window rolls down and 2 guys in the back draw Glocks with drum magazines. We just kind of froze up at first, but then our driver pulled off hastily. Later found out those guys got arrested for shooting someone else that same day. I, 18F back then, now 25, was on my way home at night after meeting a friend. My home was just 10 minutes away from the train station. After a few minutes I felt someone following me. No big deal, I thought, just someone else walking home. But I started walking faster. I realized the person behind me was catching up. Weird. In my head I started to make up scenarios of how to defend myself if the person would attack me. Never would I think of this to actually happen. Well, until I felt something on the back of my head, hitting me hard. I went furious. I turned around and attacked the guy. My mind was just full of anger towards this stranger who, what I thought, hit me. We were wrestling until I fell on the ground. He was sitting on top of me, strangling me. I tried to crawl my nails into his eyes as deep as I could, but I started to black out. Suddenly there was this thought in my head: wake up, or you will die. Well, adrenaline kicked in again and I opened my eyes and screamed at the top of my lungs, attacking him again. That helped. He stood up and began to run. I lay there for a few seconds, then I started to run home, still screaming. My mom was already at our door and opened for me because my screams woke her up, or her mother senses, who knows. She immediately called the cops and they could arrest him on the same night. It turned out that he actually shot me in my head from behind. They assumed that the gun didn't work properly, the bullet didn't penetrate my skull and stuck in there, but as far as I know they never found out why the gun misfired. I'm glad though. He told the cops that he already followed me a few times in the past, but never had the guts to do it. He wanted to kill me and rape my dead body. I know that's a wild story. I have some Swiss newspaper articles as a source if someone cares though. If you're from the area I'm from, this will probably sound familiar. But I got absolutely blackout drunk at an end of the year / graduation party and ended up having to get taken home early. Later that night another student at the party ended up stabbing and killing 5 people. Turns out he had mental issues, schizophrenia, and thought everyone at the party was a werewolf / vampire who threatened his life. He never went to jail but ended up being found non-criminally responsible instead. Well, my mom got mad at me when I was 20 and I didn't give her money for her birthday, which I'm assuming was to pay off drug dealers of hers, so she stabbed me between the ribs. Ended up getting stuck in the bone and had to get it taken out in surgery. My supposed best friend decided that my wife and I were too perfect. Therefore it must all be an act and I was obviously abusing her. He was at our house after I made an awesome dinner and we were having fun drinking and singing karaoke. I went to the kitchen to put some glasses away, came back and leaned on the couch with him slightly behind me to the left of me. Then I heard a thunk and felt an amazing amount of pain on the top of my head. He had picked up the whiskey bottle on the table and smashed it into my skull. I was very confused as to WTF was happening. Then the blood started pouring. I didn't want to get blood everywhere, so I went to the kitchen. Dude is pacing back and forth saying weird shit. I thought about my gun, which was close by, but I wasn't thinking quite straight. He left. I had a huge concussion and still suffer side effects from it. My number 2 goal in life is to live longer than that asshat just so I can shit on his grave. When I was 2 weeks into my first job as a 16-year-old, at a smoothie establishment that should be known to NBA fans, we were robbed. It was late, and my coworker's friends had been playing pranks on her all day, so when I saw someone burst through the door, I thought it was just that. Until, that is, I had something metal pressed against my back and an arm wrapped around my chest. The robber gave the whole stereotypical give me all the money spiel, and ordered us to go into the back room, kneel down, and face the wall. As I was kneeling and hearing him walking towards us, time seemed to slow down. Thankfully, I had been refilling juices whenever he came in, and so the door to the back room was partially blocked by a heavy cart. With whatever substance he was on, he wasn't coordinated enough to get past it to us, so he fled. He was followed by my coworker's husband and caught. When he was caught, they found an industrial-sized pipe wrench wrapped tightly in his fist, so that he could get a stronger grip when swinging. I'm so glad that cart was there. Once a year or so, I would look him up in the parish prison roster to see if he was still in jail. One year, he suddenly wasn't. I later found him named in a lawsuit as having stabbed his cellmate a half-dozen times while the guy was asleep. Definitely doesn't seem like the nicest of people. 9 years later, I'm still unpacking this incident in therapy. It's why I don't like walking around cities at night or sitting where I can't see the door. I got jumped by 2 grown men when I was a freshman in college. I was walking back from my friend's house and it was about 30 past midnight. One posed as a homeless man asking for $1 and the other had on a security jacket like he worked for the university's safety patrol. When I passed the homeless guy saying I had nothing to give him, I saw the security guy walking towards me. This is when I felt a rear neck chokehold and the security guy started wailing on me. I had my bag on me, but like I said, I literally had nothing on me. They couldn't take me down to the ground. Surprisingly, I must have had an adrenaline rush. The guy posing as a homeless guy said open the backpack, find anything, let's dip. This lasted about 2 to 3 minutes, but it felt like forever. The whole time I could feel something pointy in my back, but I'd just like to think that the guy was extremely excited, and it wasn't a knife. Luckily, it was right outside my friend's house and a couple of them came running out when they heard the commotion. The guys fled immediately when 3 of my friends came sprinting towards them. I still look behind me when I walk home alone. Sophomore year of college, went with a friend to go hang out at his old college. We were supposed to crash with a few friends of his, but we met a few ladies and ended up at a pool party. Next day went home and my friend started getting calls from one of his buddies' moms asking if he'd seen him. Turns out in the middle of the night a few guys broke into the house, kidnapped my friend's buddy and roommate. Took their car and drove them out to the middle of nowhere and executed them. I guess it was part of some gang initiation. I was supposed to sleep there with my friend. I still sometimes think about it and get the shivers. Edit, spelling. This happened in 1999 in Steubenville, Ohio. Someone posted a link to the wiki page in the comments. Thank you to all the people who commented. I posted this before work and then my phone went crazy for the next few hours. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I find out she is in a terrible drug-fueled abusive relationship. Every night, I tell her to call me, I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she calls me, I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married, we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for the threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off of me, but being blindsided and them being on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black, then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment I was certain that this was the end of me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head, and I yanked them off of me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, Her ex had paid two people $50 to kill me that night. In my late teens, I used to buy my weed from random dudes in the projects, low-income housing. One day we gave some money to a guy named 40. He took it and went inside one of the buildings. We waited in the car for several minutes. We started to think he had taken our money and left. Right about that time, a car full of coked-up white dudes pulled up beside ours. Apparently my friend owed them money. They pointed a gun at him and said that if he had enough money to buy weed, then he could pay them back. I really thought they were going to shoot us and just drive off like it was nothing, and I hadn't even done anything wrong. I thought I was gonna pee my pants. Right about that time, 40 came back out with our weed and an even bigger gun. He scared them away and then we went back to his apartment and smoked a blunt. What a good man. Turns out he was only selling weed because he had a 6-year-old daughter and that was the only way he knew to give her a better life than he had. I babysat his daughter occasionally for the rest of that summer. I really hope she got a decent childhood and that her dad stayed safe and out of jail. TLDR, almost got shot but was saved by random drug dealer who turned out to be a decent fellow. My dad was a meth addict. He did lots of fucked up things, dropping me off at trap houses to have sleepovers with other coke babies, living in a house full of animal shit and hoarding. He sicked his pit bull on a black child. He was a real fucking character. One night he came looking for my mom and I at our place. Mom wasn't there. Grandma was babysitting me. I was sleeping in bed when somebody started to try and open my window. It was locked, but they kept jamming something into the bottom to try and force it open. At the same time, I heard the living room door being tried by somebody else. My grandma snuck into my room in her nightgown, apparently woken up by the same thing, and told me say nothing. Don't even whisper. We laid under my bed while a group of men shouted for my mom to come out, slammed their hands on the windows to try and break them, and jumped on my grandma's car. She called the police and barely whispered into the phone. Eventually the cops arrived and the men scattered. Long story short, my dad and his other meth head friends came to the house with guns and knives with every intention to kill me and my mother because she was going to get custody of me. If my mom wasn't so vigilant with locks, we had 3 different kinds on the front and back doors, we would have died. Well, I'd if this counts as an attempt or not, but my wife, my kids and myself went to church one time and we ran into one of my wife's old flings. This guy followed my wife around and our daughter and kept trying to talk to them. So I confronted him about it and told him to back off. As we were leaving, he makes sure to yell across the parking lot telling my daughter goodbye. My wife forces me into the car and we leave. So I message the guy on Facebook to ask him what his problem is and he tells me that my wife and daughter are his friends and I have no right to tell them who to be friends with. I told him again to back off or I would call the police. Fast forward a week, I worked every other Sunday. I get a call from the pastor saying that they had to call the police on the guy because he was causing drama looking for me. When they arrested him, he had a backpack with him that had a sawed-off shotgun, a meth pipe and some meth in it. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother but I would always stop her. I was 8, she was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep roped off part but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water and I got scared and started to swim back but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me but after she aggressively pushed me under the 3rd time I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister who had already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry I tried to drown you." It wasn't until I was almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do to someone.